Do you ever find something you don't remember owning? Be it a toy or trinket you found as a kid and forgot about, or a photo you don't remember taking? This happens to me often. I've always been a bit of a hoarder, collecting useless junk out of virtue and holding on to it. I've forgotten about the things I've collected over the years countless times, only for it to come back to me when it ends up surfacing later on. When I found a blank, unmarked disc in my closet, however, my mind was drawing up blanks. Of course, finding something like this would be relatively normal to most people. But I can't think of any time in my entire life I had bought an empty DVD. My friend was over, helping me pack things up for a yard sale, and he hadn't seen anything like it either. As it was getting late, we figured it was fun to sit back and watch whatever forgotten memories lay on this dusty, scratched up disc. I excitedly put it into my DVD player and hit play. After a few seconds of nothing but odd, indescribable audio, white text appeared on the screen. It read, "The Simpsons," and it wasn't centered. This only brought up more questions. Clearly, this wasn't something I or my family had recorded. Perhaps the disc was left there from the previous owner? The text abruptly cut out, and after a few more seconds of nothing, it finally began. It looked to be the intro to The Simpsons, but it was very low resolution. You could barely tell what was actually going on. The only way I could tell what it was supposed to be was the audio, which was a very shoddy cover of the show's intro theme, done on a piano or some other keyboard instrument. The intro stopped shortly after the family sat on the iconic couch and cut to what I can assume is the actual episode. It's pretty hard to explain how the episode actually looked, but I can confidently say that it was animated in a completely different style to show what it's trying to be. The actual art style itself looked normal, outside of the unbearably low resolution. But the animation was very minimal. Characters barely moved, standing perfectly still while talking. The only part of their bodies that would move were their eyes blinking and their mouths poorly lip-syncing the dialogue. Homer was standing in the middle of the living room, staring at the TV in the background. You could hear random notes on a piano being held at random intervals. The camera zoomed into his face. "I wonder how my family's doing," he uttered in a hushed, almost perverted tone of voice. It cut to black and faded into what appeared to be a footage of an outside of a school recorded off of a phone. It was night, so the only light that was coming from the phone's flashlight. The cameraman crawled in through some hedges, walked to a window, and held the phone up to it before the footage cut once more to an animated segment of Bart and Lisa in a classroom. It was dark, and the door was barricaded by a pile of desks. "We're safe here," said Bart. "Nothing can come in or out." Lisa's face looked oddly distorted. The proportions of her facial features went wrong. The camera lingered on a close-up of Lisa's face before she abruptly frowned, baring photorealistic teeth, accentuating this was the sound of a loud bell, which quite frankly scared the shit out of us. My friend turned up to me, visibly upset. He demanded to know if I was pulling some sort of joke on him. I couldn't answer. I was just as confused as he was. Cutting us off, Lisa would begin to speak in a masculine voice that didn't fit the character whatsoever. It's too late. We can't continue to run from our problems and delay the inevitable. After saying that, she would walk towards the window, opening it before vaulting out. The camera would zoom in on Bart's face. He looked legitimately distraught, bags having formed under his eyes. Suddenly, the footage would begin to distort, as if the file was corrupted. Through the mosh of pixels, however, I could see that it would resemble a face. Having suddenly appeared behind Bart, the footage suddenly cut again. Now showed more phone footage again. This time, the cameraman running through the woods. The camera flailed widely up and down, and you could hear the cameraman gasping for breath. Eventually, the cameraman drops his phone on the ground, face up. You could see the soles of his shoes for a brief minute as he disappears out of view. A cropped image of Lisa's face appeared in the middle of the screen. While the sound of wind chimes would begin to play, the video cut to another animated segment, this time showing Homer in the living room once more. Noticeably deteriorated, with litter beginning to pile up around the corners of the room. The light was flickering and eventually blew out, with only the light from the TV Homer's smiling face, his eyes vacantly staring into two different directions. I love my family, he said. I love my family very, very much. It cut to an overhead shot of the city. All the buildings were gray and dingy, forming a very bleak landscape. Pan down, zooming into a street with Lisa standing in the middle of it. The discordant piano ambience had slowed down, becoming much lower pitched and somber. I no longer know what to do, she said. Lisa's eyes had begun darting around in random directions. Gray, foggy pupils, her mouth hang open in a grimace. No longer sinking her dialogue, what will happen? I'm uncertain the world will go on. Whatever happens, I accept it. Her eyes stopped spazzing, beginning to stare in the distance vacantly. I love my family. The animation began to deteriorate before cutting once to some more film footage, this time of somebody trudging through the woods at night. The piano began to speed up. By now, as the cameraman walked down the clearing ahead of them, I began to hear a strange sound beginning to fade in, barely audible. After a minute of aimless wandering, the sound had finally become legible. It was a clip of Marge saying, Homer? In a worried tone. The clip would continue repeating, becoming slower each time as the sound of the piano became frantic and shrill. The cameraman would eventually came across a run-down shack in the middle of the woods. The obnoxious piano finally stopped, abruptly cutting, leaving us with nothing but the sound of forest ambience and the cameraman's labored breathing. One last Homer played before the doors to the shack swung open. The camera swinging around rapidly as the cameraman ran backwards at top speed. You could hear leaves crunching behind them as the footage corrupted once more, cutting to black for a moment. You could hear what sounded like a dialogue from a Simpsons episode, but it was so low quality and gravely that I couldn't make out any words. Finally, it faded once more to Homer in his living room. The room was a pigsty. The carpet was wet and torn. The walls were bare and covered in graffiti, and the couch has collapsed. In the middle of the room, barely illuminated by the flickering off-screen TV, was Homer, his face off-screen. The sound of wind chimes started again, and an image of the Simpsons family would appear in the middle of the screen. Homer's face was cropped out of the image, and the image disappeared, and the footage remained on this ominous, unmoving shot of the dilapidated living room before cutting to a silent, black screen for a few seconds. We both got up, assuming the disc was over, but suddenly it was abruptly cut to Homer's face with a loud droning noise. His pupils were gone. Almost fell over the shock, as just as abruptly as the image appeared, it was replaced by another black, silent screen. The DVD player ejected from the disc, filling the room with the smell of hot plastic. The video was finally over. We were both flabbergasted, left with more questions than answers. My friend finished boxing the item for the yard sale and hurriedly left, still confident that I made the disc to screw with him. I held the strange disc in my hand, contemplating what to actually do with it. I decided to look around online for any answers. Maybe this was a strange bootleg, maybe it was an odd art project. Regardless, asking around online didn't get me anywhere. Eventually, I decided to just keep the disc. One day, I'll eventually forget about it until it pops up again sometime. Still though, I feel unsatisfied. Maybe one day I'll stumble across an answer. One question remained in my head though. What did any of it mean?